budget hearings, and tonight it's general government, but we also have some other items to deal with. And the first thing I will ask is, are there any public comments? I don't see any in chambers, and I don't see any on Zoom, so I will dispense with that. The next thing is the approval of minutes from our March meeting. Nicole circulated those, and I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. Is there any discussion on the approval of the minutes? We'll go to a vote then?
John?
Aye.
Tyrell?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Chenna?
Yes.
Natalie? Yes. Dave?
Yes.
Nicole is yes. George?
Yes.
And Bill?
Aye. Motion passes 9-0 to approve the minutes. And the next item is the FY 2022 capital budget round 2, and it is on our latest agenda iteration. Hopefully people had the chance to look at it. There's not a lot on it compared to earlier round, but if Jamie wants to take over and go over round 2.
Sure. Through Mr. Chairman to the committee. So in the memo that's on the that's attached, that was sent out by Alicia earlier today, I appreciate everybody's patience and willingness to take this up. I know it's a little bit last minute, but so the remaining amount of free cash, just to keep this simple, was $829,406. As folks recall, every year during the free cash capital process, we traditionally hold around $800,000 for snow and ice removal for excess. And as you can see here on the list of proposed expenditures, the snow and ice did go over the allotment in the operating budget this year. And so we're requesting an appropriation of $229,169 to go towards paying off the town's snow and ice cost bills. And then that leaves a difference where traditionally, for those who are new or watching at home, this may be the first budget hearings folks have gone through. Traditionally in the past, this is a well-established precedent from my predecessor. Any excess snow and ice money traditionally has been supported by the Finance Committee and the Council to then be put towards road and sidewalk maintenance infrastructure throughout town. The proposal tonight is $510,237. And the reason why that number, I put a caveat in there, which I know all of you have heard me say it a bunch of times over, but as part of a land transfer agreement with the Commonwealth, $200,000 of that would go towards work on the SNET Trail. This, for those that don't recall, because there's been a lot of things going on in our world recently, we don't remember everything. The town is had to file home rule legislation to inherit a half a dozen acres next to the Beaver Street Recycling Center. And the state is getting some town conservation land to add to the state forest. That's the site that eventually will be the Beaver Street Recycling Center. We're gonna have to line the area where the garbage was thrown in back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right next door. And we should start that process up. As part of that agreement, the town is obligated to spend $200,000 in improvements to the SNET. And the SNET project, which is state property, by the way, has been permitted by the Conservation Commission, so now we can go forward with the work. And then the final request is $90,000 for technology, desktops, docking stations, and computers, kind of entering hopefully the final phases of IT department's conversion of older computers to newer computers. So a short memo, Mr. Chairman, and just a few items, and happy to entertain any questions folks have.
Any questions for the administrator on the round 2 of the capital budget? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to vote on the capital budget.
Move the capital plan round 2 as detailed.
Any seconds?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. There's no discussion on round 2. We'll go to a roll call vote to approve and recommend to the town council.
John?
Aye.
Tyrell?
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
Chenna?
Yes.
Natalie? Yes. Dave?
Aye. Yes.
and Bill.
Aye. It passes 9-0, so we will refer this to the council with favorable vote. And the next order of business is the operating budget for 2023, and as you can see in the agenda, is general government, human services, culture and rec, debt and interest, and employee benefits. So, Mr. Helen, do you want to take it from there?
Sure, through you, Chair, to the committee. So I will not spend a lot of time rehashing all of the information that's in the budget narrative. For those of you out there who are watching on TV, you can go to franklinma.gov, and there's a button right there for town budget. Just click on that. People can follow along if they go to the FY23 budget materials. I would focus, if people are looking for the narrative and they're looking for a sleep aid at night, they can go to the 109-page budget narrative or budget message that we're required to put out via the town charter. And if they're really looking for all the details, they will go to Appendix A, which has a line item by line item breakdown of exactly where all of the spending is in this budget proposal. A couple of quick themes before we kind of dive into the control sheet. I just want to first, part of the budget narrative that I will say is I can't say enough about the staff and the team that the town of Franklin employs, both on the municipal side as well as the school budget side. We really truly do have the best team imaginable. And I think one of the themes that through this budget process this year that I've come away with is, we were able in this budget this year to meet a lot of departmental objectives, most notably, Franklin Public School District asked for a $2.4 million number, and we were fortunate enough this year to be able to put that in this proposed budget. As we come out of the pandemic, revenues appear to be moving in the right direction. This budget takes a strong leap back towards getting us to pre-pandemic levels, and as the summer and fall go through before we set the tax rate in the fall, we hope that, or at least I hope all of us hope, that this thing is in the rearview mirror, and hopefully we can move forward and get back to business the way it was before, which will certainly be good for town coffers. And the final thing I would say before getting into the highlights or questions, Mr. Chairman, is that going through this budget and looking at the priorities of the departments and the staff, I think one of the themes I came away with is to be very grateful and thankful for what we have. We know that there are going to be policy disagreements, and we always want more. But we should be very fortunate, given the state of where we are in our community, in our state, in our region, our country, and probably our world, to be sitting here tonight, being able to make the investments in the community the way we are. We can always want more. There always will be an opportunity to debate more. And I expect over the next year or two, a lot in the community will debate where the next step is the town of Franklin needs to go in providing the quality of life and great services we do. But for right now, I hope the community at large comes away with a gratefulness and appreciation that we really are able to, as the pandemic has started to wane and we're moving forward, we're in an incredibly fortunate position to not be making any huge budget cuts. We're not laying off any staff members. In fact, we're moving in the other direction, which is I think this organization is exponentially stronger, better, smarter, and more prepared than we've probably ever been. The fire department hit an ISO 1. The police department's about to be accredited. The town is probably more competitive than we've ever been to get a AAA bond rating. Recreation, library, senior center, all of our departments are providing great services. And when I look at the graduates this year from Franklin High School and look at the exceptional achievements of the athletic and academic departments there, I really hope people take a deep breath this summer and really appreciate what we have. We're very, very fortunate in this community relative to the rest of the world to be in the position we're in. So I'm just going to run through really quickly, Mr. Chairman, the revenue highlights. So Alicia, if you could go back up really quickly to the page 4, I think it is. I know the Finance Committee has already kind of gone through a lot of these numbers, but really quickly, because I know you all took the control sheet tutorial in January, so I know you know what all these numbers mean. But if you look at the levy up top, we're looking at about $1 million in new growth, which is certainly a little less than last year. But we're being cautiously optimistic that investment in the community and in residential homes will hopefully continue to grow, and we'll see if that revenue is a little higher come the fall before we set the tax rate. If you scroll down to the state revenue, you can see right there, that's the reflection of the governor's budget of House 1. We already know the House of Representatives has passed the budget with a higher local aid number. Not much, but it's there, and we expect the Senate to be higher than the House. And then sometime in August or July, we'll get a real number from them, and we'll adjust those numbers in the fall like we normally do. The key numbers for this portion, Alicia, if you could just scroll down just a tiny bit more to other revenues. If you look at the other revenues category, really where the optimism and hope lie are local receipts. And that's where you can see we're estimating in there $10.5 million in local receipts. We have added back in estimates on the hotel tax, bumping up a bit, as well as the first year we will have the cannabis excise sales tax, which is 3% on all sales. Those businesses have only been open for a few months, so FY23 will show what a full year will be for those businesses, and we'll be able to get better revenue numbers going forward. But and then the second line item on there is the host community agreement one. You'll notice a decrease, which shouldn't really impact the budget at all, because those are dedicated revenues, as folks may remember, specifically for impacts. As outlined in my budget narrative, you will see all of the clauses and notes and asterisks. The state Senate did pass a comprehensive reform of the host community agreement law, and my anticipation is probably in FY24, I'm guessing that revenue source will probably be completely gone, and that won't even be on this list anymore. But for right now, that's just a placeholder on there until we get those issues solved as well. And if you scroll all the way down, Alicia, to the bottom, you'll notice we don't really leave a lot of unused levy capacity, and the anticipated revenues are about $128 million when all is said and done, after state aid, local receipts, new growth, and the debt exclusions. So I'll stop there really quickly, Mr. Chair, and just ask if there's any questions on the revenues before I move forward.
And one thing I was remiss in not doing is, similar to last year, in past years, we won't do line item votes or section votes. We'll just go quick to the bottom line on Thursday evening.
Great.
So I just wanted to mention that. Any questions on the revenue sheet? Natalie?
I have a this is different than the last version we saw, right? Because I feel like at a portion were we negative at the initial version we saw.
It is.
What is the primary change that drove that?
We raised new growth from 900,000 up to $1 million
Okay.
as an estimate, and you know, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we're here in November before the tax rate. It's higher than $1 million, but you know, applications have been a little lighter at the planning board and conservation level, so we'll have to see in ZBA. And then the big one is really local receipts. You know, we looked at numbers through the end of March. You know, local receipt revenue, particularly motor vehicle excise tax, has been very good. And it really showed, I think, the finance team and us that the local receipts, the diversity of revenues that go into there, really provide, I hope, you know, but I think over the last couple of years it did, a good safety net. Where if one revenue like hotel dips, we didn't know this, but during the pandemic, meals went up because more people were eating out, fast food was open, and so receipts were good that way. So we expect those to still stay strong. So that's about if you scroll up just a little, I think it's 1.1 million we added into that number, Natalie.
Got it.
Yep,
Okay.
1.105. Yep.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Any other questions on the revenue sheet? No more up here, Jamie.
Okay. So again, before diving into the budget document, just a couple of quick highlights. As I mentioned, this budget proposal for expenditures does include a a $2.4 million increase for the Franklin Public School District, which is one of the largest investments we've made in one-year line item, certainly in many years. I know that a couple years ago, we were able to do $3 million, another increase a couple years ago for 2.1, but to be able to do 2.4 is really good to support the school district. And about $500,000 is eaten up into pension costs. I know many of you, we've talked about this many times. Not much we can do about it, but pay the bill. So on average, that's about going up $500,000 right out of the gate every year. I would note that debt is still relatively low in this budget, but as many of you know, there'll be some projects coming up in the next couple of years, particularly Remington Jefferson remodel and a police station, and that doesn't even include whatever the decisions will be in the next several years on Davis there. And the Public Works did see an increase in this budget of about $350,000. They were the only department where we weren't really able to fulfill their full request, and the main reason was the stormwater issue. But this budget proposal does add back in the 2 positions that were lost in FY '22, so at least the staff will be able to get a couple more folks down there. And the only other highlight I had before getting into the line items was just to highlight one more time the MEC. The budget showcases a 50% number, which is what we're obligated to pay. The good news is due to the good management over there financially, the original 4 towns is going to see a rebate of about $230,000, and so that money eventually will be routed into the stabilization fund for a couple years down the road when the full MEC comes on board and the full assessment does. So, and I did list out in the narrative a couple of new positions. In addition to the 2 DPW, we added in this budget 2 additional part-time kitchen staff to help the new chef at the senior center, who's killing it. And we added in a full-time benefits coordinator under the town human resources director due to the I'm sure we'll get to healthcare at some point tonight, Mr. Chair, but to deal with all the benefits for both the town and the school, that position will be shared. And then the only other position added in here, Mr. Chair, is the increasing the conservation agent from a part-time position to a full-time position. There's too much work to be done, but also it's very hard to hire somebody at that level on a part-time basis these days, given the labor market, and we were very fortunate to attract a phenomenal candidate who started a few weeks ago. So, and finally, the Community Preservation Act will be coming back. I anticipate the CPA committee will vote on that on June 7th, and then the Finance Committee will probably see it at their next meeting, and then go to the council for ratification of that first master plan. So that's all off budget. Just so people are aware, all federal stimulus money, Community Preservation Act, none of that is incorporated in here. Those are all off operating budget and dealt with through different statutory levels. So if you want, Mr. Chair, if you want to just start with the budget document, we'll just go line item by line item.
That makes sense to me.
All right. So Alicia, if you want to just go down to count 111, which is page 7?
Page 5, I think.
Any questions on the $4,000 for the town council? All good? All right. 120, department number 123, town administrator. Really nothing in here that's much different than previous years. Happy to answer any questions.
Bill?
George?
Expenses went up 3 times. Is that moving the passports or that kind of stuff? Well, I'm sorry, from 21
Yeah.
to 23, it's up 3 times.
The main increase was the marketing line item. The marketing line item used to be at a lower amount for marketing expenses for the marketing position. It used to be in the planning office, and it moved up in that previous fiscal year. So that's the main cost driver there. Cell phones also went up. We have cell phones in each individual budget. So there's a couple of other odds and ends, but the main driver was the marketing line item.
Thank you.
Okay.
Move on?
Move on.
All right, that That greedy finance committee, Department 131. Any questions? You have some more room for conferences if people want to go to meetings. Just gonna stop me when you want. All right. Department 135, comptroller. Again, really there is a small increase here for mainly due to contractual services for our auditing firm.
Keep rolling.
Keep going? All right. Just for folks at home, in case they're looking for the personnel sheets are in here too, so if folks are interested, they can go in the budget and look. Department 141, Board of Assessors. Pretty level funded. Steady as they go. Any questions for Kevin? No?
Nope.
Kevin's smiling. Department 147, Treasurer Collector. Finance team does a good job maintaining costs.
There's a decrease for that office. Is there a reason why under the salary account?
Yeah, Carrie, why don't we stop listening to me for a minute and you can come up and talk. That'd be great, if seems how you've...
Gary Bertoni, our treasurer? With an assist from Steve Shaw.
Hi, Carrie Bertoni, Treasurer Collector. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Patty Wiley retired, so that was her payout in fiscal year '22. So that's why the decrease in that line item there.
Okay,
in my
great.
budget.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome.
Any questions further for the treasurer's budget?
Department 151, Legal Services. It's just really for the part-time attorney and then other incidentals. This year is a collective bargaining year, but we're one of the few towns that does not usually use labor services if need be for collective bargaining. Try to save money. Department 152, Human Resources. This is the first department to see a small bump. As I mentioned earlier, the main reason for the increase is to hire a full-time benefits coordinator that will service both school employees and municipal employees. That's about it.
What was the 25,000 consulting that dropped off?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, through the chair, so that was for a compensation and classification study, which, if you can see all the happy faces in the audience, they just got done with their job descriptions. But in all seriousness, we're in the middle of doing that study. The funds from this year, if need be, will be encumbered in the next fiscal year, and so we don't need that appropriation in there anymore.
George?
Last year, we talked about software for them, so they weren't back in the 1960s filing paper all over. Is that
Still the
reflected?
1990s with paper.
All right.
Um,
Is that anywhere in here?
It's coming up in a few sections down the road.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna make, that's
We
great.
leave that in the technology budget.
Okay.
Any other questions on HR? Okay.
Whoa, look at that. I didn't know it was next. IT, 155. There you will see the increases and for the software that we were talking about for human resources.
$500? No,
IT.
I can see him saying no. The only software I
Looks
see is
like about
$500.
70 to me. So if you look at FY '22, the current budget total, you got 345,000. Or if you look at the expense item, George,
expense.
FY '22 is 307,706. Department Quest 384. Some of that is eaten up into our standard model that the IT director has of a certain percentage for subscription and license fees. But the bulk of that increase is to set aside for some of the software. And I will admit, I mean, implementing software programs of this magnitude This is just the first round, I'm sure, as we go through the process. Just like we went through with online permitting, you know, it really did take a few years for the staff for the system to get built, for it to get tested out, for it to work for everybody, quality control, you know, setting this stuff up is not like Amazon 2-day Prime. It doesn't just happen. And so it will take a little while. So I foresee future investments in this area probably in future fiscal years as well.
Question on that too, so I see it's the hardware maintenance services that's really picking it up, it's roughly under 85K. Is there any, like, first-year costs in that, so like, first-time implementation cost, or is that, I don't know if that's baked in?
Tim Raposa?
Hi, Tim Raposa, Director of Technology, Town of Franklin, and Franklin Public Schools. So what I have, I know you're probably not looking at the detail, but in that first line item, there are 3 different pieces of software that we're going to be adding, 1 for the rec department and 2 for HR. Rec department is management
that's right.
software, it's about $5,800, and the HR document management system, roughly $36,000, and the personal management is for $25,000. Those are initial quotes. That would be an implementation and first year. Whenever you implement, you typically get a first year included in that, and then you would get your annual fee. So we don't.
So we, by that means we would see a drop-off in year 2, because your implementation would be paid in year 1.
That would be my guess, and it would probably vary every year because it's probably tied to your number of employees. Similar on the school side, how software is typically tied to the number of students.
Got it, okay, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions on here?
Any other questions for IT?
I've just, $100 for meetings and conferences, it seems like with the way the world is, there might be some desire to be someplace listening to what other people are doing, that's all.
So a lot of my, that is actually a membership in MGISA, Massachusetts Government Information Systems Association. I've been a member of that forever, and that's really the only association on the town side that I need to go to, and most of the municipal conferences we get to go to for free. We don't really travel. I mean, I don't really get on an airplane on the town side. On the school side, I will go to a national conference every year, obviously not the last couple of years. So I have money on the school side budget to pay for that type of conference, and it's all IT related, so it benefits both sides.
So we get to talk again Thursday, when is it, Thursday?
Thursday.
Yes, I will see you Thursday.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Anything else on IT? Nothing?
Nope.
Okay, Jamie?
Department 161, Town Clerk. Look at the overall budget, went down slightly. I think that's just due to the election and staffing transitions over the last year. Pretty easy. Count 164. Elections. Is what it is. It's a low amount of money to make sure our elections run. 61,000,
There's
pretty
only
easy.
1 this year, right?
Two.
Primary in
Well,
general.
the primary. We shouldn't pay for that, but that's all right.
Do we get reimbursed a little? Yeah, do we get a little bit back?
See, I've always felt primaries are party functions. So the parties ought to, we're figuring out who's there, who's gonna be on the ballot, so
Yep.
they should pay for it.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. I agree. Yeah, thank you.
I wonder why they don't.
Yeah.
Next item?
Department 176, the Zoning Board of Appeals, we did propose an increase to them, mainly due to the large amount of legal ads we have to post. So we have a lot of legal ads, and this year's year-to-date was a little over the budget of what it was. And so we had to cover some costs last fiscal year. But we're still required by law to put the full ad in the newspaper. So I believe we pay $30,000–$40,000 as an organization to pay the local newspaper to run all the zoning ads in there, even though we have a free legal service right on our website, shameless plug, franklinma.gov, email subscriptions, go right there, you can get all the legal notifications for free to your email inbox, but we still have to pay the, speaking of, I know, sorry, George, speaking of paper, so.
More paper. Plus, nobody, I'm sorry, I'm a newspaper reader, but it's all online. I mean,
Do they still do like 8-point font?
Yeah.
Yeah. 6. Right, okay. Account 177, planning and growth, community development. Again, most of this increase that's in Brian's budget is attributed to two things. One, the conversion from a part-time to full-time conservation agent, but also and you'll see this reflected in several other budgets, all of the administrative staff in the first floor suite was all under the building commissioner's budget for many years. And as staffing has changed and retirements have happened and cross-training has occurred, we were able to settle out one of the administrative permitting clerks into health, one into planning, and one into building. And so the increase here is going to show Tyler, in this case, is now part of the planning budget. And you'll see later on, probably on Wednesday, excuse me, when the building commissioner's here, you'll see 2 positions fewer in his budget. And then while I'm on it, there's one other administrative staff member who's going to be, you'll see in the Board of Health budget later on. But that reflects the larger increase in that budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on planning? Okay, next item.
The AgCom, Department 184, like we do for all boards and committees, if there's either no staff support or other personnel line items, we usually have a nominal amount of money in there for general expenses.
Next, I think is-
192, big enchilada. Where's Mike? There he is. So building, what we normally call public property and buildings is what most people know as facilities. And if you can see in here, there's mainly an increase on the expense line item. The good news is we're able to get Mike's budget, facilities budget back up to the levels pre-pandemic. Many of you who have been around, but for those of you who weren't or are listening at home, over the last couple of years, we did have to make some redundancies, not in staff, but in expenses, to watering lawns and some other things, and so now we're able to put those costs back in.
Yes, a quick
So
question.
the high school grass should look greener this year, maybe than it did over the last couple of years, right, Mike? That's like $100,000 a year to water the lawn up there.
With all the facilities and you're going back over the past 2 years and with all the COVID money and so forth, generally speaking, what are the improvements we've seen, like in terms of HEPA filters, I think those are, I might be mispronouncing it, and everything else that, that a lot of those CARES money is supposed to go to. What have we seen here in terms of filters or lighting or all the other stuff that was supposed to help, prevent or at least guard against COVID?
Yeah. I mean, I think the CARES Act money in particular, first is the UV technology, I think, is the stuff you don't see. I know many of you are familiar with that. But that was probably between the HEPA filters and the UV technology, it was probably almost over $2 million worth of investments, I think. Am I right on that, Alicia? Probably about $2 million in investments, because we spent about $1 million on the Chromebooks for remote learning. That was about our allotment, and then obviously PPE and some other stuff on there. But for the long term, the UV is probably the thing that will be most prominent. Nothing against the filters, but eventually, as we just found out, you got to replace the filter within the filters. And so at some point, we're going to have to decide whether or not those are worthwhile investments too, whereas the UV technology, it's just the bulb changes. And that should really keep the air quality in all of our buildings and schools, at a much better level than it's ever been.
And,
So thank the feds for that.
yes, absolutely. And how about Davis there? Does the school still control that now, or is that over to the municipal part of the government?
So just for clarity, and so the public knows, the school department does not have building costs relating to any school, but particularly DT. It's always been, and for the foreseeable future, if not forever, it will be in the town budget. And so, heat, water, you know, lights, all that stuff, all is accommodated for in the town budget, and people can go again into the budget documents and look at exactly how much it costs, for all those expenses. The school department still does have, they've obviously closed the school, but they still do, own the property and still, it's still deeded to the school. I just wanna make mention, because it's fresh, because I've been getting emails today. Again, you know, transferring a school property is not a Google search. It is an extraordinarily cumbersome process. And the reason why is the state Mass School Building Authority, which holds the purses to new school buildings, wants to make sure that towns aren't closing things and then 6 years later turning around and proposing a $200 million school to which they're gonna pick up 50% of the tab. So, in their defense, there are a lot of extraordinarily strong checks and balances, in, state law and state regulation. And it is paramount, among all other things, that the town adhere to those regulations so that we don't cut our nose off to spite our face down in the long run. It is worth the additional time to make sure that we get this right with the MSBA. And so, you know, I can't give anybody an anticipated date or time. I can just tell you that, like I updated the council last week, you know, in fact, we got an email today from the general counsel there. We're just working through the regulations and the requirements that they're asking us to do. And so they have asked us to do a bunch more stuff, and documentation. And so, we're going through that process now.
And on a related question, I noticed that there was a job opening for a junior building custodian there. Why hire somebody if the building prospectively is going away? It certainly is closed down. I get the utilities.
It's not true, but Karen's gonna dispel all the myths.
There was some issue where I think Franklin TV was picking up a very old job posting.
Oh, right.
Oh, okay.
Something gets archived on the website. It's in like a folder and the link still works. So somehow I think it was Franklin TV had a posting to Davis Thayer from like 2018.
All right,
So,
that's
yeah,
what I
we
saw
had-
on Franklin.
We had that question come up quite a bit. There's not an opening at Davis Thayer.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
But again, a shameless plug, we have an email subscription list with job postings that are modern. If people are looking for jobs here, sign up for the list.
There are other.
You know first. There are other positions open, not at Davis there, but there are other positions open, so, we'll talk to Franklin TV about, seeing if we can rectify
I
that.
think they were looking, it shouldn't be there anymore. They were,
Okay.
it was a couple months ago, but I know a lot of people did see it.
I saw it more recently, but I couldn't tell you when. It's been in the
Yeah.
past few weeks, I think. But,
Yeah,
We'll look into it again.
thank you.
sure.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
on-
I had some follow-up questions to yours, because what I want to make sure is, so school building maintenance lives in this department.
Correct.
So I think what I'm wondering, based off of Bill's question, is the building isn't active anymore, so I would expect a decrease in the amount to maintain it?
Through this year, so last year, in FY '22, this current fiscal year, we downgraded all those expenses to what the minimum temperature is and what we need to keep the lights on and just the basics
So
for
that's already been-
the heat in the building. Yeah, so all those numbers have already been dragged down to the bare minimum to keep the school in the excellent maintained shape that it is.
Got it, so we would have seen the decrease in last year's budget.
This current fiscal year, yep,
Yeah.
22, yep.
Any other questions on facilities? Think that's it? Next item, Jamie? Central Services, I believe.
Yep, Central Services, Department 196. I think we had an increase in postage.
By quite a bit. By the looks of it.
More bills to send out, you know, postage goes up, is what it is.
Any questions on Central Services? I think that's it for general government, correct?
That's it for general government, and you want to do human services next?
Yes, but can I just ask something? I'm not sure
Sure.
where else it would go. I'm gonna assume maybe general government, and I like to look at old town reports, and we used to have, like a lot of communities have a sealer of weights and measures,
Oh, yeah.
which we now apparently contract with the state.
I think we always have, but that's for Gus on Wednesday.
Okay.
For the building commissioner oversees the sealer weights and measures.
I'll ask Wednesday then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Okay, Human Services.
Okay. Of course Alicia's already there. What page are you on? 102.
105 on the actual.
105 on the actual thing. Excuse me. Board of Health, yep. So the Board of Health, Department 510, again, as I mentioned earlier, the major increase here just reflects the one permanent administrative staff member that's been moved from the building office budget, not from the office, but from the budget into the Board of Health. Melissa?
And you're asking for a nurse this year as well.
Actually, through this year, we already have one. The 39,250 that's in the budget in the expense line item is half of the registered nurse's salary. The other half is coming from a 3-year grant through the Metacomet Public Health Alliance. And so Alicia DeTula is our registered public health nurse, has been a phenomenal job, and she is stationed down at the senior center.
So she'll be paid out of 2 line items for the foreseeable future.
Exactly, for at least the next few fiscal years until we've, obviously evaluate, post-pandemic where, health services are. She's at the senior center for a reason. That's really where a lot of the coordination from a lot of the work comes, but she's also been doing a lot of flu clinics, a lot of, obviously, COVID-related stuff. And I know she's really looking forward to getting out and being a lot more proactive on other public health issues as well. So that should be good at least for another couple fiscal years.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on health? So I guess on to the COA.
Council on Aging. So Department 541, which is probably one of the budgets that's seeing the largest increase. But as folks know, we hired a director and assistant director who are both here tonight. And we did a little reshaping of the department, a little reform. You'll notice in the budget document narrative, for the first time ever, there's an org chart for the senior center. So if folks didn't get that far along in the budget, please go to the back. They did a great job on that, and shows some of the chain of command, if you will. The only additional expenditures in this line item are what I mentioned earlier, that with the new chef and cook, which is really taking on a different role than previously, where it's really a kitchen manager, almost the general manager, if you will, of the restaurant, Common Grounds Cafe in the senior center. Volunteers are a core institution at the senior center, and they can certainly, and they will continue to help out a lot. But somebody dealing with the register, the orders, and a little more of the purchasing, where we're buying all the food. We're trying to establish numerous new accounts throughout businesses in Franklin. So if a lunch is needed for a program, we may not have to use it. We can go to a lunch space and get it delivered. There's a lot of different things happen, and just from that level, a couple of part-time assistants in the kitchen will be very helpful. So, though, in addition to the full-time deputy director was added this year, that accounts for the major increase down at the senior center.
Okay. Any questions?
A crazy question, but there's a revenue side to the senior center too. It can't be very much, and
Yeah.
it shouldn't be very much.
Well,
But is there a revenue piece to that?
there is, and Danielle and Christina will be using FY23 as their new kind of control, if you will. There's a lot of revolving accounts. There's a lot of gift accounts. And there's a lot of gifts. And there's a lot of state grant monies as well. In fact, recently we just got wired this week $20,000 for rides to the senior center and Dial-A-Ride that we got through Representative Roy through federal stimulus money. And so as they came in both in the middle of the fiscal year and in the middle of the winter, we've been reviewing all those accounts and trying to do a better job tracking where all the money's going. And we thought this year, moving forward, I even brought up the idea of maybe getting rid of the revolving accounts and just having those revenues be general fund revenues. But I think we all thought it was a much more advantageous idea to go through a year. We know they have the resources to do what they need. but really do a much better job tracking where the money's going, where it's coming in. And so we hope next year to have a much more robust answer to that question.
When I get old, I'll go look at it.
Well,
Older.
I hear the breakfast is unbelievable, George. I don't know why you're not down there testing out the goods, you know? You should.
Give me time, give me time.
Any other questions
I have
on
a
the
question.
council of aging? Yes, Natalie?
This is kind of a general question, but it's highlighted here because there's so many vacancies, is that all of these vacancies, if the people don't start prior to the fiscal year, that'll all just be pickup, right, on the budget?
Exactly. So those are all just put there in the vacants just to acknowledge that the seat's not filled.
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody else set? Okay, that's it for that budget. Veteran Services?
Department 543, Veteran Services, steady as they go. Not a huge increase. I will note one minor policy change. If you look in the expense line item, which is page 109 of 133, if you could go down one more there, Felicia. Where is it here? Memorial Day celebrations. You'll notice a small increase there of about 5,200. Previously, that line item was just for the flags, but we've made the decision to take over Memorial Day, which used to be sponsored by a private group. The town will sponsor the event, which will be able to pay the small amount of costs from the permitting to deal with the parade. And Shannon and Deborah are working with the other stakeholder groups in town who will actually be doing a lot more of the coordination and the work. But, but I know from their standpoint, it was a huge relief. We do Veterans Day, so it makes sense to do both. And they're commonly funded this way in other communities as well.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I don't see any questions, so I believe that's it for Human Services, correct? We're on to Culture and Recreation now?
That's correct. Account Department number 610, the Franklin Public Library. What needs to be said about the library? We love it, that's right. Possibly the happiest group of people going. No, in all seriousness, I mean, what's there to say? They do an amazing job. We meet the state minimum spending requirements.
I have a question, a few. I know when we built the building, we have space for community groups, and of course, the pandemic hit. Are we seeing overall library usage? I mean, the pedestrian people coming in?
Yeah.
Have we seen that come back at all since the library reopened?
I'll let Felicia, on her way up here, to explain about the foot traffic. I don't know if community groups is necessarily, I know a few use the rooms there for meetings. And I know a couple organizations do some things there. I don't think that's where the foot traffic is. I'm guessing it's from all the other services, right, Felicia?
Hi, Felicia Odi, Library Director. Yes.
You're gonna get an assist from Stephen.
Oh. Thanks. Felicia Odi, Library Director. Yes, next year you're going to see the numbers. We are seeing the community rooms are being used very much so, and also the foot traffic for programming. So this year is not a good year for the numbers because we were closed 11 of the 12 months last year. But we opened in September and we've been going full swing ahead. The numbers will be reflected next year. Every day the building is packed.
Oh, good.
The only problem we have now is parking.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions?
Well,
George?
speaking of meetings at the library, does it have, let's say, like tonight, there's the planning board and us, and tomorrow I think it's design review and school committee and us. Is there cable capability there if we had to overflow? I mean, it's a nice place to overflow. No. Steve is saying no, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So upstairs on the third floor, the training room, we're doing a scaled-back version. I mean, I think that will become a much more available second chamber, if you will. We're doing some work up there, you know, over the next year to develop that into I don't want to say obviously not with the capacity of this room, but to make that into a room that will probably be used every night, just like this room is as well.
Okay.
In the training room, so following up on that, on this building is now capable of broadcasting as well, correct?
It is not. We would use the OWL feature up there.
Okay.
But it's a good meeting space for some of those committees that George just mentioned, where TV's not capable and, you know, it's difficult to find a room for them. The space is, we analyzed whether we could put in a whole nother studio or whatnot, and it just, there was no easy configuration where the mechanical boxes were, and it just would have taken up way too much space. And we still use that room, especially the schools do, quite a bit for a lot of trainings and a lot of school staff meetings. And so during the day, we need the room to be able to be moved around a little bit just to accommodate that. So we expect at some point, as the municipal building renovation project goes on, just like you saw down in the clerk's office, with carpet, paint, there'll be a whole variety of improvements over the next year or two here. When we get up there, we'll do the same, and I think it'll become a pretty good flexible space for other meetings at night.
Okay, thank you. Any
Speaking of
questions?
it, just an advertisement for, apparently tonight we're live streamed to YouTube, which is new to me.
We're moving the ball down the field, George. You spoke about Medway, watching their Board of Selectmen meeting on Facebook Live,
Yeah.
and here we go.
I was just looking for us on,
Yeah.
and I can't find it, which is another problem. But we are live streamed, as an aside.
Started last week. According to Steve. So.
Okay.
All right.
Moving on, I think, on to recreation now. If there's no other questions for the library? Okay,
Nope.
recreation?
Department 630, I think the salary chart and the expense line item reflect the recreation director's programs for the next fiscal year. I'm sure he feels the same way I do, that you know, after the last couple of years, we're looking to get a little bit more consistency and certainty, and I know for a fact that registrations are off the charts. And this reflects not huge staffing changes at the recreation department, but over the last couple of years, there have been a lot of changes, and both Kim and Sean have been great to have on the team, and I think it's full steam ahead.
Is it safe to assume, as in past years, that the rec department will be fully funded with revenue?
I'd say it was pretty close.
Okay. I'm seeing a nod from Ryan, so
Yeah.
I'll take
Yeah.
that as a yes.
He might even, he might even turn in a few more bucks too, right? Yeah.
Okay. Any questions for recreation? Okay, next item.
Historical Museum, Department number 690. Sadly, our archivist, Rebecca Finnegan, is decided to continue her tour of duty of the Utah National Parks in Zion, doing her archival project for the National Park Service. I can't say I don't blame her. It was like, why you try to be friendly as much to people as possible, because you never know when you end up to need a contact in Zion National Park for hiking. But she sent some pictures to Alicia and I and the staff. She looks like she's having the time of her life in her late 20s, and if I were her, I'd stay out in Zion National Park as well. So we'll be posting that job for her replacement, hopefully in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any questions, so move on. The museum. I think.
Department 691, the Historical Commission, slightly different, same amount of money they've had for years for their annual expenses.
Okay,
Account 695, same with the Cultural Council, is the $15,000 for the town's share of the mini grants that they give out. And I should make a plug for any of you who have nothing to do this Saturday and want to come see an exhilarating cultural event. We have the executive director from Mass Cultural Council from the state. Michael Bobbitt is the featured speaker at a symposium on Saturday. Tickets are on Eventbrite. I think they're 10 or 15 bucks. But having Michael Bobbitt come out is a big deal. He's one of the biggest leaders in the state on arts and cultural development. And we're really excited to have him. So if anybody out there is interested in the event, should sign up for this Saturday from, I think, 9 to 1.
Okay.
And Cultural District Committee, account department 696, same as the other boards and committees, a small expense budget for basic expenses.
Okay. I think that does it for culture and rec, so the next item is debt and interest.
So account 710, thanks Alicia. So you get account 710 and 750. Really here's the debt service for the remainder of, for the year. As you can notice, the debt number has gone down slightly. We're not gonna have a panic, but I just wanna point it out, that this budget is going down $200,000 because some of the town's debt and interest are moving off the books. That's a good thing, right? We're paying our bills, it's good for bond ratings, all that stuff. But that $200,000 that was in there between the 2 years is getting absorbed somewhere else. So when the town needs to come back at some point and add more debt and interest to the books, and we all know the fears of the marketplace right now, you know, if those numbers go up because, for example, we have to do a remodel of Remington Jefferson, well, if interest rates in 2 or 3 years are gonna be that much higher, that's just more money out of the pie, out of the budget. And so, you know, as we move forward, these are still items that are of concern to us. We don't wanna just go borrow money and start paying debt just for the heck of it. But it is something that in future years could kind of see a crossroads, where if there is a project or projects in town that the community wants, or that we need to do, we're gonna have to be creative about it to make sure that we don't deduct from other services in other parts of the budget, so. But for this year, we'll take the victory that some of our debt's moving off the books, and Carrie and Chris do a great job managing our profile with our consultants, and things are looking good.
Okay, any questions on
Yeah.
debt, George?
Is the high school 100% on here now?
I believe so,
Yes.
yeah. The high school, though, just to clarify, is in debt exclusions.
Yeah, I understand
I know,
that.
but I want to
Yeah,
make sure the folks watching at home understand that the high school, I don't think, comes off the books till after 2040? Yeah,
Okay,
So
but
we're-
it went on in groups,
yep.
didn't it?
And
I
it's
see
broken out
two
by
there.
groups. On the revenue sheet that I mentioned earlier, the debt exclusion line item, you can see high school 1, 2, 3, or
Yep.
you know, wherever it goes. So that's pretty-
One quick note question. I think it would be interesting to, and I get this is like a template, so you can't mess with it too much, but it would be interesting to see when all these retire, just so you can kind of see when cliffs fall, and I know obviously you guys are maintaining it and whatnot, but obviously some of these numbers are really huge, so it's like what follows up and what year is that, you know, focus.
We can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Are the two known projects the only two big ones? Remington Jefferson and a police station? Is that? I can't think of others, but.
Well, Remington Jefferson's really the largest well, I should step back. So Remington Jefferson's probably the one that'll start getting discussed probably a year from now. The police station, I anticipate this fall, we will get the designer and the OPM at least on board to start the analysis of siting, how much, what do we need. And then the recycling center is a few years out. And then really, probably the biggest question for the community, out of facilities that I can think of now, is probably gonna be Davis Thayer. It's not going to be cheap to do whatever the town decides to do with Davis Thayer. It will not be, there's no scenario which that will be affordable. That'll be a very expensive price tag, again, depending on the use. and the terms of it, but, depending on how that goes, that could be another project as well.
One more editorial comment on debt. I would be in favor, I noticed 2 fire trucks in this last year. I hate to see free cash get chewed up when, a fire truck could be an obvious use, because it's worth, like, the ladder truck is gonna have to be replaced. It's gonna be $1.5 million, I would guess, somewhere in that range. And yet we will reserve it in free cash for years and years and years and let the cash sit there. Where you could borrow it and spend probably less than you're gonna put in free cash. And I realize there's an interest rate and all that stuff. I just, on a policy basis, I think something over, pick a number, $1 million, we ought to consider borrowing it like we did for the fire trucks.
Well, the good news is you must have written the finance policies, because capital borrowing items are for $1 million and over. The 2 trucks that were just
I didn't
bought.
write them, but I read them.
Yeah, right. The 2 trucks that were just bought were close, but as you know from not only hearing the chief, I mean, you're 18 to 24 months now if you order a truck. That was just the sun, the moon, and the stars aligned on that one, so we had to pounce while it was good. But, I take that comment, George. I agree completely. I mean, we'll look, when the truck's needed, we'll look at what the options are and what the interest rates are, and, we'll try to make the best decision possible.
Some of the stuff the DPW wants too, that, like, what was the one the Vector
The
truck
Vector
or
truck,
something?
yeah, the exciting Vector truck.
Yeah, that was like $500,000 by itself.
It was, yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And I don't know how we paid for it. It's not here, so I assume.
yeah.
But it
Well, the
would
Vector
seem
truck
like
was
we
paid
have
out
a
of the
better
sewer.
use of cash. Use someone else's money to do this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
pay the fee for it, but
Yeah,
not, cash.
yeah.
Just an opinion.
I think, I'll close on this. I mean, I think the conversation is still there with the police department. I mean, I will give the schools a lot of credit. The school department, for years, we've been hearing comments of, well, why aren't the Chromebooks in the operating budget, right? They buy them every year. Let's just put a line on it. And they have actually slowly over the years gotten to a point where, if you notice this year, they didn't ask for a capital appropriation for Chromebooks, because they have started that process to move it in the budget. We've begun to have a discussion about possibly police cruisers. We buy them every year, would free up free cash possibly. And so I think that what you're pointing out goes along with a lot of the other conversations we're having about how to use free cash, how to save money, what are the best financing ways. And for the ladder truck in particular, which will probably be $2 million by the time we get there, based on current economic trends, we very well would look at borrowing for that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I think there's that,
I think, 750 interest,
and we still have employee benefits.
910 employee benefits. So a couple of the trends in here, I already mentioned a moment ago. The 2 biggest chunks of money, if you look at FY22 versus 23, it's a little over $1 million. People may say, well, where's that come from? Well, one, the pension assessment from the county, which, as I always note, and it's getting worse, over the last 10 years, in raw dollars, the pension assessment has doubled in our operating budget. All controlled by state law. There's nothing we can do about it. We pay the bill. It is what it is, but I just want to point that out, because each year when we see the tax levy come in, people wonder where the money goes. Well, there's $500,000 a year right out of the gate. Health insurance, if you notice, in the next line item down, has only increased in this budget about $40,000. And I really still can't really believe that. But 2 things are at work here that are important for the community to know. One, we have an insurance advisory committee made up of all of the different departmental bargaining units, as well as the non-union staff. And really, it's an exercise in collaboration and compromise. and all of the various members of those bargaining units come in, and we get together monthly in this room to discuss health insurance trends. The bad news is we, healthcare providers lose money on our employee pool. So our loss runs they ebb and flow. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're worse. Usually, over a few year cycle, a health insurer will probably break even with the town of Franklin. So for every dollar they put out, every dollar we put out, they put out. So they're not making any money, and in certain instances in quarters, some of them are probably losing money, and in quarters where they do well, they're not making a lot. Healthcare is a business. There is a cost for service. People have to get paid. And so unfortunately, our pool between the town and the schools, we're not a very competitive or attractive demographic for health insurance companies to compete with, which makes this number even more impressive. And really a lot of it has to do with the introduction to the health savings account, the high deductible health HSA program. A little over a quarter of our employees subscribe to it right now. And so they save on their premiums, and we save on costs. We reinvest that. If you're a family, we put $1,500 into your HSA. You can take out deductions out of your paycheck, tax-free. And so a lot of employees have done well with this. They seem to like it. And so we've been able to maintain that commitment and still be able to cut down. But I give the employees, particularly the bargaining units, a lot of credit. It's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of talking. And so over a few years, the education has gotten out there through all the departments. And ironically, and I don't remember the exact percentage, Karen, but I believe 2/3 of our employees don't even hit the deductible. So when you factor that in alone, it's a complete no-brainer that somebody would join that plan. So we continue the outreach. We have a benefits fair this week for all of our school and municipal staff. And then the final part of this budget that really shows the big drive up, if you look down at OPEB, other post-employment benefits, per the town policy, we increased the budget line item $50,000. As all of you saw at our OPEB assessment, we're in the top 10% of Massachusetts communities doing the best at this thing as anybody else is. It's a slow and steady approach. And then finally, compensation reserve, which is really just to set aside money for collective bargaining negotiations.
Any questions or comments on the benefits?
So the 700 grand would be in effect redistributed to whichever budget it needs?
It all depends.
All depends.
I mean, it's collective bargaining, so we'll just have to see
Well,
it all.
I understand, but assuming they're all settled and it's all 1.5%.
Right.
Right. But that would be, the police portion would go to the police budget, or is that how it would work?
Yeah,
So at the end of the year, that'll be either zero,
exactly.
or
It'll be zero one way or another.
crumbs.
It'll be zero one way or another.
Can I go back to OPEB?
Sure.
It still mystifies me that, we've got, I'm gonna guess $9 or $10 million in our version. Is that the reserve?
I think it's over 10 now, Chris,
Is it?
right?
Well, I'm sorry.
The OPEB reserve, it's what, $10 million?
Oh, yeah. I think it might be up near 11.
Yeah.
But those days are over.
Yeah, I know, well, whatever.
Now.
The question and I understand that it's the name misses me, actuarial, thank you, somebody. An actuarial thing, but at what point do we get to use the money that we're putting in this fund, or is it just gonna sit in a closet and earn money?
It's going to sit in a closet. Our finance
Until-
team is myself, the comptroller, the treasurer collector, the human resources director, and assistant to the TA, Alicia. And we typically use the joke that she might benefit from it someday, because it will sit in a closet for a while. Ultimately, it's a piggy bank. for an obligation and a debt that will come up onto the town at some point. And, you know, we were talking today, can barely know where the world will be tomorrow, let alone 20 years from now of when the town may use it. But ultimately, it's like your stabilization accounts. It's like everything else. It is a legal liability. And the way we've dealt with it, I think has been looked upon very favorably by the bond rating agencies, and certainly other towns as well, so.
I don't wanna beat a dead horse, but we'll have, I forget what the total was, it's 70 million plus or minus a little
Yeah.
bit, the overall liability. Let's say we win megabucks tonight, the town does, and suddenly you have $70 million.
Yeah.
Do you then pay the benefits out of that? Is that what happens, and the yearly thing goes away?
Not necessarily, because we can afford the benefit now. It's really for retiree, ultimately, it's retiree health insurance. And so the expectation is that health insurance will be just that expensive, really, in 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
All right, I'm gonna
And
be
so
a
then
pain
when you
now.
get to that breaking point where the town either has to sacrifice an exponential amount of its budget to pay that obligation, or they don't have money from somewhere else, the town has a safety net to be able to pay for that expense from.
Okay, I'm gonna be a pain again.
Okay.
Does that not apply? We're gonna have, how many contracts? 10, let's say.
Yep.
And they'll have a dollar value going out 3 years. Why aren't we required then, if you're using the OPEB theory, why aren't we required then to be putting away for the third year now?
Yeah. It's a good question. It's kind of like stormwater. I didn't go to grad school to be stuck trying to figure out how to fund a federal mandate on stormwater. I just know it's a problem that you have to fix. And, you know, some of this kind of predates, you know, even my professional career. You know, it's just kind of the way it rolled down. Chris, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
It just mystifies me that we've got $10 million or 11 or whatever it happens to be sitting for.
Well, investing.
Until 2000
Investing.
Do I remember 2032? Is that the one it's
Oh,
paid?
no, this is 2040s.
48.
I won't be here to see it.
That's
None of us
correct,
will be,
yes.
George.
That's just the short answer.
We should.
Basically, once this fund is fully funded, then we'll be taking a certain amount of money, instead of paying it directly to the retirees, we'll pay it into this fund, and then money will come out of the fund to pay the retirees at a much lower amount than our current liability is. So
Okay.
it's gonna be self-funded, and if you look in the actual OPEB report, there's actually a particular chart, if you will, that shows the amount that we were liable for in this year coming out of that fund. Even though it didn't, it came directly out of our expense budget. At some point in time, it will come out of that OPEB trust, and then we'll be funding it on a yearly basis.
Sounds like hocus pocus to me, but life
I
goes on.
agree 100%.
I actually listened to Dan Sherman, so it wasn't any clearer at the end of that either.
You may want it that way.
Okay.
Anything else on employee benefits? I'm sorry, was that, yep. The retirement pension. Oh, we have risk management also.
Yep, you got one more. So account, Department 945, risk management. This is basically the town's insurance bill for property and casualty. Everything but workers' comp. Workers' comp is in the line item just above it.
That's a big jump. Any color there?
Just everything. I
Everything
mean,
across the board?
yeah, I mean, there have been a couple of, a couple of capital items that had to go into a couple of buildings that had some issues, but it's kind of like your auto insurance, you know, once you get into one little fender bender, it hits. But there's nothing systemic. I actually expect that increase to be wiped away from from the Maya Rewards program, which is our training program. So you can max out a certain amount of dollars every year, which is about about 50, 60,000 a year. So we do all of our training, custodians, DPW employees, a lot of our non-union staff, police, fire. We get credits if we do a certain amount of trainings. We max out on all those every year. And then we end up kind of offsetting the cost increases, usually due to the exceptional training programs we have, and hopefully prevent injuries. I will say that workers' comp, our rates are microscopic, relatively speaking. We have incredibly good workers' comp rates. So some stuff with buildings, things just happen, water leaks. It is what it is. So.
Okay, I think that's it for the insurance, correct?
Yep.
And the next thing is future agenda items, and I have a few things. I know one thing we'll be talking about is CPA, because they haven't voted on their plan yet, so they'll do that, and then we see them on the 15th.
I think is it the 15th?
Our meeting's on
Yes.
June 15th.
Yes, June 15th. It is.
So CPA would be one thing. A couple of other things I'd like to see on the agenda. One in particular, and I think a lot of this just comes out of the whole ARA business, ARPA, I'm talking about NOLA plan. And that's Norfolk County. You know, the control sheet says our county assessment is something like 240,000. One of the things I learned from our deep dive of Public Works, which was interesting, is we do take advantage of a buying service they have. We buy fuel from DPW, buys fuel, but they offer other services, whether we use them or not. But it'd be kind of nice to know, because for a lot of people, county government in the state's kind of murky. You know, some people have it, some people don't. We have to give them money. What do we get back in return for it? And I wouldn't mind, talking about that a little bit sometime.
Sure.
And one other item I had for future, and whether it's June or off to another time, would be Franklin TV. They came up earlier, and I know Peter Facio?
Yeah.
Did a presentation to, I think, the council several years ago, which was very interesting, because they discussed, it's funded in a unique way, I guess, right, on our cable bills and everything, but if people get less and less cable, then how's that gonna be funded? So it's a unique arrangement we have with them, and it's a pretty good resource, and I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about that sometime.
Sure. It's a great idea.
Any other ideas for future agenda items, either June or into next fiscal year? Not at the present time, I think that's it.
Great.
And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Roll call vote, please.
John?
Aye.
Tyrell?
Yep.
Mike?
Yes.
Chana?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Dave?
Yep.
Nicole, yes. George?
Yes.
Aye. The motion to adjourn has passed 9-0. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
See you tomorrow night.
Yeah, no, Wednesday. We consolidated two meetings.
Thursday, right?
Yeah, I thought it was tomorrow.